I woke up in a strange nursing home, not knowing how I got there. The nurse said my son put me here. He never even bothered to explain why. The room felt cold, almost suffocating. As I sat there, I realized something was missing my belongings, my dignity. Have you ever had someone you loved betray you so deeply? Share your story. The smell of antiseptic lingered in the air, and the soft beeping of machines was the only sound around me. The room looked unfamiliar, with pale walls and sterile metal furniture. A woman in a white uniform entered. "You're awake," she said, her voice too calm, too rehearsed. "Your son brought you here." The last thing I recalled was sitting at home, reading the paper, the world outside moving as usual. How had I gotten here? There was a lump in my throat. "Why?" My voice was hoarse, like I hadn't spoken in days. I wanted to ask more, but my mouth went dry. The nurse didn't seem to notice the confusion in my eyes. She just nodded, checked the clipboard at the end of my bed, and walked out without another word. A cold wave of realization washed over me. I looked around the room again, nothing that belonged to me. No personal items, no pictures, no sense of home. Just white walls and a narrow bed that felt too small for someone who used to have a life full of moments worth remembering. Where was my stuff? Where were my things? Did they just take everything from me? It hit me hard. The anger I didn't even know I had. I thought of Ethan, my son. The thought of him bringing me here, leaving me in this sterile place without a word of explanation, it stung like a slap in the face. How could he do this after everything we'd been through? "Your son will be back later," the nurse had said. But I didn't want to hear his excuses or whatever reason he had for putting me here. Each morning I woke up in the same sterile room. No sense of time, no connection to anything familiar. The nurse came in, checked the charts, and left. I wondered if Ethan had told them to treat me this way, or if they just assumed I was helpless. The silence was overwhelming. I spent hours lying in that bed, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. How did this happen? How had I let it go this far? All those years of sacrifice, of putting others first, and now this, alone, in a room I didn't belong to. I could feel the walls closing in on me. Then the whispers started. At first I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but no people were talking. Friends from the old neighborhood. Family members I hadn't seen in years. They weren't coming to visit. They were talking behind my back, spreading stories about me, about what had happened. Ethan had told them I was too difficult to care for, that I had become a burden. He had painted me as someone who couldn't handle life on my own. It was like a punch to the gut. How had it come to this, Sarah called the next day. Her voice, always calm and steady, was the only thing that felt familiar in all this mess. "David," she said softly, "don't let them get to you." "It's not that easy," I replied. "Everyone's talking, Sarah. I don't know what's worse, the fact that they're saying these things about me, or the fact that I can't do anything about it." "Of course you can," she insisted. "You just have to decide what you're going to do with all of this. Don't let Ethan win David. He's playing you and you're letting him." I didn't know how to explain it to her, but she was right. I wasn't doing anything. I had just been going through the motions, letting the world move around me while I kept quiet. For the first time, I started to wonder if that was the real betrayal, not just Ethan's actions, but my own silence. But then the shame crept in. Was I really going to cause a scene now? I'd never been one to fight back. I had always been the one who held everything in, who swallowed the hurt, because I thought that's what you were supposed to do for your family. Sacrifice yourself, never complain. But now it felt different, like I was being suffocated. "David, I know it's hard, but you have to stand up," Sarah continued. "You have a right to know what's going on. You have a right to speak up to make sure you're not being taken advantage of." "I'm not sure I can do it," I said, my voice low. "Then at least make a plan. Do something," she urged. "Because right now you're letting him control everything. He's telling people you're a problem. But you know that's not the truth." The truth? I hadn't really thought about what the truth was. I had been so focused on just getting through each day, I'd stopped trying to figure out where I stood. What was the truth, really? I thought back to the day Ethan came to the nursing home. He had been all business, barely looking at me as though I was just another problem to be solved. No apology, no explanation, just cold, dismissive action. I was getting angry again. But this time it felt different. Not like the usual frustration that came with my situation. This felt like something sharper, something more decisive. I had put up with enough. The nurse came in that afternoon like she always did. She checked my vitals and moved to leave without a word. But this time I couldn't hold it in. "Is my son coming today?" I asked, my voice firm. She hesitated, her eyes flicking to the clipboard in her hand. "Yes, he'll be here later." The more I thought about it, the more I felt the ground beneath me shift. The accusations, the whispers, it didn't sit right. Ethan had always been distant, but now it seemed like he was putting on a show, casting me as the villain. He was painting a picture of me that I didn't recognize, and I wasn't sure if I should believe the rumors or if they were just part of the web he was weaving around me. But the more I sat with it, the more the doubts festered. I began questioning everything. Had I really been that difficult? Did I truly become a burden? Or was it something else I couldn't trust my own mind anymore? The little things started to add up. The way he avoided eye contact when he came to visit, the way he talked to the staff, the way he treated me like I wasn't his father, but some inconvenience he had to tolerate. Maybe it wasn't just his actions, but my own acceptance of them that had let me end up here. The truth felt elusive, a shadow I couldn't quite catch. Every time I thought I had it figured out, something else would pop up, making me question my own judgment. Maybe I had been too quick to trust him, too blind to see what was really happening behind the scenes. The thought gnawed at me, but then came a conversation with a stranger that only deepened the confusion. "Did you know a nurse's aide?" asked, leaning in slightly. She looked nervous, like she was afraid of being overheard. "Your son, he's been telling people. Well, he's been saying you can't take care of yourself anymore. He's talking about selling your place." My heart sank. Selling my place without even a conversation. Not a question, not a warning. Just a decision made over my head, as though I were no longer part of the equation. The more the thought settled, the clearer it became this wasn't simply about needing assistance or temporary care. This was erasure piece by piece. A slow removal from my own life. Had I become a fool in their eyes? Was this truly happening? Could Ethan, the child I raised, the boy who once clung to my hand, really be the one orchestrating all of this? Betrayal throbbed beneath the ribs, confusion thick enough to choke on. A part of me wanted to confront him, demand answers, force the truth into the light. But his story had already been spun, told to everyone who would listen, casting me as unstable, confused, a burden. What words could undo the damage of a narrative repeated often enough to become truth? The pressure settled heavier, with every passing moment tightening around the lungs. Action was impossible without proof, and the pieces scattered across my life offered no clear picture yet. To fight blindly would only drive the wedge deeper. To move too fast might ruin everything. Sarah refused to let me sink into that uncertainty. She called again that afternoon, her voice carrying strength even through the static. "David, stop doubting yourself. You've lived a long life. You know when something is wrong. Don't let him twist this. Don't let Ethan own the narrative." Anger flickered small but sharp. But what if he's right? What if I am a burden? What if... All of this is my fault. No, she said, cuttings through every spiraling thought. You're his father. You've carried him farther than he'll ever admit. You don't get to rewrite your worth because he's rewriting the story. The words should have soothed. Instead, they scraped against old insecurities. Pride, regret, doubt, they tangled together. Ethan had always been the admired one, the polished one, the son everyone assumed had a good heart. Had I missed the warning signs? Had I been blind? Or had I simply believed too much, loved too much? Days passed in a haze of searching. Anything that might point toward clarity became a lead. Conversations with the lawyer were saved, messages archived, phone calls recorded, every scrap of information stored away in hopes something, anything, would reveal Ethan's intentions with certainty. But each thread unraveled into another dead end. Each discovery felt incomplete, missing context, missing proof strong enough to bring confrontation into the daylight. Then, just when exhaustion settled in and surrender hovered at the edge of thought, something surfaced. An email. It was a simple thing, buried in an old folder on my laptop, but it was a start. A request for the sale of my property. Ethan had signed it, but it wasn't on my behalf. It was just a request. No mention of me in the conversation, just a series of questions directed toward my financial state. The phone call came early in the morning, just as I was beginning to settle into the numb routine of the place. It was my lawyer, David. I just got off the phone with the bank, he said, his voice tight. They've processed the sale of your property. Ethan went through with it. The words were like a slap, their sting settling deep. The house, my home, gone. Just like that. I didn't authorize it. I muttered, my hands gripping the edge of the bed as though I might fall through the floor. David, I know. But there's no signature from you. It was all handled by your son's request. He said you couldn't manage the property anymore. My head spun. I had seen the signs, the whispers, the way Ethan had been maneuvering behind my back, but this was the moment I knew things had crossed a line. It wasn't just about control anymore. This was theft. And it felt like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just taking away my independence. He was taking my future. I wanted to yell, to scream at someone, but I didn't. It wouldn't do any good. The reality of it was settling in the weight of his betrayal, pressing down on me. Ethan had taken everything from me, and I had nothing left to hide behind. The silence I had lived with for so long didn't feel like a shield anymore. It felt like a prison. The next morning I sat with the papers, the sale documents, the emails, the phone records. There had to be something, some trace, some proof of his manipulation. I wasn't going to just sit back and let him take what was mine. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts, and when I looked up, Ethan stood there in the doorway, looking as though he'd just stepped out of some perfect, carefully curated life. He smiled at me, his expression tight, almost like he was trying to reassure me, like everything was okay. Dad, he said, walking in and closing the door behind him. How are you feeling today, like I'm being robbed? I replied sharply, not bothering to hide the bitterness in my voice. Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my response. What are you talking about? I didn't mince words. You sold my house. Without telling me. Without my consent. His face shifted, the smile faltering for just a second before he regained control. Dad, you don't understand. I'm doing this for you. You're not fit to take care of yourself anymore. This place is better for you. Better. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Better. You've taken everything from me, Ethan. You didn't ask. You didn't tell me anything. You just took. He sighed as though I was overreacting. I was just trying to help. This isn't the way it was supposed to go. I stared at him, the anger bubbling up again, but I held it back. The way it was supposed to go? You didn't ask? You didn't even think to ask. I've been doing just fine until you decided to fix everything that wasn't broken. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence in the room said everything. He thought he was doing me a favor, that he was helping. But the truth was, he was making decisions for me that I never asked for. I had never felt more like a stranger in my own life. I want the house back, I said, my voice steady, despite the anger that surged inside me. Ethan let out a small laugh, though it didn't reach his eyes. It's not that simple. It's already done. I don't care, I said. I'm not just going to let you steal from me, Ethan. For the first time, he looked like he wasn't sure what to say. He shifted his weight, glancing down at his feet, then back at me. I thought you'd understand. I'm just trying to make your life easier. The letter came in the morning, a plain envelope with no return address. My hands trembled as I tore it open, the weight of uncertainty hanging heavily on my chest. The note inside was brief but clear. Ethan has been lying about the property sale. He forged your signature to make it happen. It wasn't just business. It's personal. I read it over and over, the words sinking in slowly like stones dropped into water. The anger that had been building over the past few weeks now had a name, a face. Ethan had manipulated me, and now I had the proof. The truth was finally clear, and it was worse than I could have imagined. I leaned back against the chair, feeling the weight of the revelation. For so long, I had told myself I was overreacting, that there was a reasonable explanation for everything. But this was different. Ethan had been systematically tearing apart my life, pulling strings behind the scenes, and I had been too blind to see it. The pieces of the puzzle started to fit together in a way I hadn't expected. All the little signs, the quiet dismissals, the unexplained decisions had led up to this moment. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't just about taking the house. It was about control, about power. Ethan wanted it all, and he was willing to go to any lengths to get it. The anger still burned, but now it was sharper, more focused. I wasn't just upset. I was determined. But determination alone wasn't enough. I needed to think this through carefully. I picked up the phone and dialed Sarah. She answered on the second ring. "David, what's going on? I didn't waste time. I have proof." Ethan forged my signature to sell the house. He's been lying to everyone. There was a pause on the other end. Then Sarah's voice came through, calm and steady. "You've been sitting on this for a while, haven't you? I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to believe it, I admitted. But now, I can't just sit here and let him destroy everything." Sarah sighed, her voice soft but firm. "You've got the proof now. You have to act. But don't act out of anger. If you want to take him down, you need a strategy. You need to think this through." She was right, of course. But it was hard. The emotional rush of finally having something to fight back with was almost overwhelming. I wanted to pick up the phone, call Ethan, and confront him, demand answers. But I knew that would be a mistake. I had to be smart about this. I had to plan my next move carefully. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, breaking my thoughts. "I don't know," I replied. "It feels like everything's falling apart. But I have to fix this. I have to take control back. I'll help you," she said, the determination in her voice, making me feel less alone. "Let's figure this out step by step. The first thing you need to do is gather all the evidence. Anything else you can find that links Ethan to this documented. Get everything in order." I didn't say anything for a moment. The weight of her words settled in. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about taking back my life. "Okay," I said finally, my voice firm. "I'll start gathering everything. But what happens after that?" "After that," Sarah said, "you take him down. You show everyone who's been lying. But you do it the right way. You do it legally. I didn't need to be told twice. This was my chance to not just fight back, but to regain what was rightfully mine." Ethan had thought he could erase me, sweep me under the rug. But I wasn't going to let him. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, documents, and meetings. I had to be meticulous, gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Emails, contracts, and anything that could prove Ethan's deception. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about him thinking he could control me, thinking he could walk all over me. The pressure was building, and with every piece of evidence I found, the anger grew. But I kept it in check. I knew the only way to win this was to be smart, to be methodical. And then, as I was going through some old files, I found something else. A series of text messages between Ethan and his lawyer talking about the sale and the steps they had taken to smooth things over. The messages were incriminating, clear evidence that Ethan had been planning this for months. I couldn't believe it. This was exactly what I needed. I saved the messages, printed them out, and locked them away for safekeeping. I wasn't going to let Ethan get away with this. When I finally sat down with my lawyer to go over everything, I felt the weight of the past few weeks lift off my shoulders. We had a solid case now. Ethan wouldn't know what hit him. The days were slipping by, each one blurring into the next. I hadn't felt this focused in years. There was a purpose now. I began collecting everything: emails, bank statements, phone records, and the text messages I had found earlier. Each piece of evidence was like a tiny thread, and I was pulling them together to form a rope strong enough to hang Ethan with. I spent hours each day poring through documents, making sure I wasn't missing anything. My mind was sharper now, more deliberate. Every time I uncovered another lie, I felt the anger simmer beneath the surface, but I didn't let it show. The goal was clear: I wasn't going to let Ethan's manipulation go unchecked. Not anymore. Sarah kept in close contact, reviewing everything I found and helping me refine my strategy. I was grateful for her steady hand, her logic in moments when I was tempted to act out of pure emotion. She kept telling me to stay ahead of him, to think a few steps further than Ethan would. "You have to outsmart him," Sarah would say, "and you can't let him know what you're doing. Be patient. Make sure you're ready when the time comes." She was right. This wasn't going to be a quick battle. Ethan had planned his moves carefully, but so would I. The plan was to gather everything methodically and then make my move. But the more I collected, the more I realized just how far he'd gone. The sale of the house was just the beginning. Ethan had been laying the groundwork for months, maybe even years, setting everything up so he could take control. And now it was my turn to fight back. I met with my lawyer to go over the evidence. He was an old friend, someone who had always been able to look at things without the cloud of emotion that clouded my judgment. When I laid out everything I had gathered, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the documents. "This is solid, David," he said slowly. "But you're not dealing with just a son who made a mistake. Ethan's been running a quiet operation. This isn't about the house anymore. This is about control power. He's trying to take everything from you." "I know," I said. "I'm not going to let him get away with it." My lawyer nodded. "I'll start working on this immediately. But you need to stay low for now. Don't let him know what you're doing. He'll come after you harder if he thinks you're onto him." The warning hit harder than I expected. It was becoming clear that Ethan wasn't just a son making poor choices. He was a man who had become ruthless, willing to destroy everything for his own gain, and he wouldn't stop until he had what he wanted. The days passed with a strange calm. I didn't reach out to Ethan. I didn't try to make contact. Instead, I focused on building my case, checking and double-checking every detail. Sarah was always there, helping me keep track of everything, making sure I didn't miss any small piece of the puzzle. But as I dug deeper, I started to feel the tension rise. It wasn't just the documents or the plans anymore. It was Ethan's reaction to all of this. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching, that he was trying to track my every move. It was subtle, but it was there. One night as I was leaving the lawyer's office, I noticed a car parked across the street. Its headlights dimmed. I didn't think much of it at first, but the next few nights I saw it again. Always at the same time. Always parked in the same spot. It wasn't a coincidence. Ethan had hired someone to keep an eye on me. I couldn't let him know that I was aware of his watchful eye. Not yet. The last thing I needed was for him to get even more desperate. The next morning I received a text from an unknown number. It was short and simple, but it hit me harder than I expected. "Stop digging, David. You don't want to know what'll happen next." My heart pounded. It was a warning. I knew it, but I wasn't going to back down now. Ethan had crossed the line too many times. He wasn't going to intimidate me anymore. I showed Sarah the message. Her face didn't change, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "He's escalating. We need to move faster." It wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about taking back control, showing Ethan that I wasn't afraid. He might have thought I was weak, that I'd roll over and let him have his way, but he was wrong. The day everything changed arrived without warning, and it hit harder than I ever could have imagined. I was sitting at home, finally starting to breathe a little easier after days of meticulous planning. The phone rang and I could feel my chest tighten as I answered it. It was my lawyer. "David, you need to hear this," he said, his voice strained. "There's been a lawsuit filed against you." My heart stopped for a moment. "What do you mean?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. "It's from Ethan," he continued. "He's claiming that you're unfit to manage your finances and that you're a danger to yourself. He's seeking full control of your assets." The words didn't register at first. Ethan, my own son, had taken things this far. Stealing the house hadn't been enough. Now he was reaching for my reputation, my credibility, the very foundation of the life I had built. The walls seemed to close in. The lawsuit wasn't just about finances. It was an assault on existence itself. Decades of work stability and identity felt as though they were being peeled away layer by layer. It wasn't just an eviction from a home. It was an eviction from the story of my own life. This wasn't a son making reckless choices anymore. This was someone willing to dismantle everything for control. A stare locked onto the lawsuit spread across the desk, each word pressing down with brutal finality. Anger churned beneath the ribs, deeper and more cutting than ever before. But rising through the chaos was something else, cold, steady, sharpened by betrayal. The time for endurance had expired. The man who once stayed silent, who swallowed pain for the sake of peace, wasn't coming back. Either control was reclaimed now, or everything would be lost. A deep breath steadied the voice enough to call Sarah. She answered on the first ring. "David, what happened?" Concern filled her tone, but there was also a strange steadiness, as if she'd sensed this moment circling for a long time. Ethan filed a lawsuit, the words finally formed. He's trying to take everything, and he's using this idea of protecting me as his justification. "Of course he is," Sarah said. "This is his last play. He's going all in, but you can't let him win." My back's against the wall escaped in a low breath. He's using the system now, twisting it to box me in. "Listen to me," she said, her voice firm enough to cut through everything clouding my thoughts. "This isn't about the house. This is about stripping your life away from you. You have evidence. You have the truth. Stand up and use it. Don't let him shrink you." A long exhale released some of the pressure. Her clarity had weight, real grounding weight. There was something worth fighting for, and surrender wasn't an option. Ethan wasn't going to drag me into the world of lies he'd spun. "Not this time. I'll need everything came out solid and certain. We'll take this to court. Everyone will know what he's done." A brief silence hung before Sarah answered. "I'll help you every step of the way. You're not alone." When the call ended, resolve surged. No backing down. No more room for fear. Ethan had shattered every boundary that once existed, but the tide was turning. Evidence, hard, undeniable evidence, was finally on my side. Yet as focus sharpened, another truth surfaced. Ethan's reach was deeper than expected. This wasn't just about a house or a bank account. He had woven himself into conversations, institutions, relationships, turning people who should have stood by me into unwitting pieces in his strategy. The warning my lawyer had given now came into painful clarity. Ethan wasn't just fighting for resources. He was fighting to erase me. The next morning I received a strange call. A man's voice, rough and clipped. "You're making a big mistake, David," he said. "You don't know who you're messing with." The line went dead before I could respond. A chill ran down my spine. Who was that? Was it someone working with Ethan? Or was it someone else? I couldn't let this intimidate me. I had already come this far. I wasn't backing down now. But the stakes had just gotten higher. It wasn't just about the house or the money, it was about everything I had left. I couldn't help but feel like I was being cornered. Ethan was pulling out every trick in the book, trying to make sure I wouldn't stand a chance. But I wouldn't let him succeed. He had underestimated me, and that was his mistake. The courtroom felt colder than it ever had. I sat there listening to the lawyers speak, each word from the opposing side hitting me like a hammer, shaping the reality I had to face. Ethan, standing just a few feet away, looked more like a stranger than a son. The man I had raised, the boy I once knew, had become someone I didn't recognize. It was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing how far he had gone to manipulate everything to force me into this corner. The truth had been laid out. The documents, the messages, the lies. Ethan couldn't hide from it anymore. His eyes darted nervously as he glanced at the judge, trying to maintain his composure. But the truth was there, standing stark against him. He was the one who had created this chaos, the one who had shattered everything. Not just the trust between us, but his own reputation. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, power, and pride. The judge's ruling came shortly after. Ethan was to return the property, pay restitution for the damages, and face legal consequences for his actions. The crowd in the courtroom shifted, some with satisfaction, others with shock. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I wasn't proud of what had happened. This wasn't a victory. It was a result of betrayal, a result of a son who had lost his way. The weeks after the trial were a blur. I didn't celebrate the outcome. There was no joy in seeing Ethan's life unravel. I didn't feel vindicated, nor did I feel at peace. What had happened wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. For so long I had been a man who carried the weight of guilt, of responsibility, of sacrifice. I had let those things define me, and I had let them drag me into silence. But in the quiet aftermath, I began to realize something crucial. The silence wasn't my strength. It had been my weakness. I had been so consumed by protecting others, by letting them walk all over me, that I had forgotten to protect myself. I had sacrificed my own dignity in the name of family, and it had nearly destroyed me. Now the weight of that guilt was lifting bit by bit. I wasn't the same person I had been before the trial. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a man who had learned to stand up for himself, who had learned that sacrifice doesn't always lead to peace. It can lead to bitterness, resentment, and loss. I had carried that bitterness for so long, but now I understood that the only way to heal was to let it go. It was time for me to start over. The first thing I did was leave the house I had lived in for years. It was no longer a place of comfort for me. It had become a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, a place where I had been manipulated, controlled, and deceived. I sold it, no hesitation. There was no reason to hold on to a house that no longer held any meaning for me. I moved into a small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was a space where I could rebuild, where I could take control of my own life again. I found a new rhythm, a new routine. I took up things I had forgotten about, things I used to love before all the chaos: hiking, reading, even cooking. Small things, but they were mine. They brought me a peace I hadn't felt in years. And then I did something else. I reached out to old friends, people I had pushed away over the years, consumed by my own sense of duty and guilt. I didn't want to be alone anymore. I wanted to reconnect with the world, to remind myself that there were still people who cared. Sarah was one of the first people I called. "I don't know where I would be without you," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. She chuckled softly. "You'd be fine, David. You always have been. But I'm glad you're finding your way again." And that's what it felt like I was finding my way again. The man who had been buried under guilt and fear was starting to rise to the surface. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It wasn't about forgiving Ethan right away, or pretending like everything was fine. It was about learning to live with it, to accept the mistakes I had made, and to move forward with my head held high. Ethan was facing his consequences, and I had to accept that. But I didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. That wasn't my burden to carry. One evening, as I sat on my small balcony looking at the sunset, I realized something else. I didn't need a grand gesture of reconciliation. I didn't need Ethan to apologize. I didn't need his approval or forgiveness. What I needed was to forgive myself, to let go of the years of regret and guilt that had shackled me. I had finally done it. I had stood up for myself, and in doing so, I had found something I thought I had lost forever myself. The life I had now wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe. Ethan had taken so much from me, but I had taken something back: my dignity, my peace, and my ability to live on my terms. And that was enough.